Hello, everybody. My name is Eric Diaz, and I decided to do my final presentation on femicides in Mexico. The reason I chose to do this presentation is because it actually hits very, very close to home, as I myself am Mexican. So before we start the presentation, I just want you guys to look at these images right here and kind of interpret it however you want to interpret it, and get an idea of how the situation is in Mexico. On the bottom right corner, you see a little girl holding a sign, and actually what she's holding is a sign that says "No quiero que me maten," which means I don't want them to kill me. And she's wearing a purple veil, which is the color of feminists in Mexico. So now let us begin the presentation with understanding what is a feminicidio. So a feminicidio is a combined word that could be translated to femicides, which means a homicide of a female. The reason that this is a huge issue is because Mexico and Latin America in general have always had a problem with this issue for many, many years, but it has recently come into the light. People and media tend to justify the killers and put the blame on the people murdered at times as well. What this means that when a woman is murdered, the media and the people will tend to justify the killer and say that the killer was right for killing her, rather than putting the blame on them. They'll always put the blame on the woman, which is a huge problem because in most cases women are actually kidnapped, and it is against their will that they are actually murdered, and they're just murdered just because simply they're a woman. So that is actually what we're going to discuss today. So a few statistics to actually get a little bit of idea of how bad the problem is. In 2019, there was almost 3,000 women assassinated in Mexico. Now, this is actually just the reported number. There could be many, many more cases that actually went under the radar. However, the reported number are 3,000. Unfortunately, even though the number is 3,000, only 25% of those cases were actually investigated. In other words, the rest of the 75% of those women murdered, they were actually never investigated. Their murders were never caught. Their death was never their death never came to justice, and no media ever came to report it. So you can get an idea of how that must have felt. So, in the year of 2019, there was an average of 8 murders per day, in comparison to 2017, where there were 7 murders per day. It may not seem like a lot, but then you have to consider this is a human life that is dying, you know. So we can see the situation has not gotten any better. However, the situation has gotten worse as years pass by, as the number of murdered women continues to increase year by year. So, the text I used was actually an article or a journal entry called "Victims and Perpetrators of Feminicide in the Language of the Mexican Written Press." So here I have two texts which are actually the same text. The one on the left is the original text, which is in Spanish, and the one on the right is a translated to English text. So, for the sake of this presentation, I will read the translated text, which is in English. It says, "It is recognized that the man is the one responsible for the murder of a woman, but indirectly also puts the blame on the woman, and that is done when the wording of the news highlights positive aspects of the offender that puts in doubt his or her responsibility. Some of the features that stand out on the news are the justification for discussion, quarrel, or fight, followed by the drug, alcohol, and disease, the procurator's office against suspect Jorge Luis, and even do not rule out a femicide. All because, in a state of drunkenness, the man, 29-year-old, admitted that he drank alcohol and was on drugs near the Faculty of Chemistry, and that he had been discussed. He added that the victim was called Lesbi, 22 years of age, with whom he lived from 4 months ago." So here in this article, we can see that the manipulation of the media, what it does when it comes to actually homicides against women. And it comes to show how the murders of women comes to take place. The press also comes to blame the woman and comes to go against the woman despite being the man's fault at the end. This is the unfortunate truth that goes on in Mexico, and it's something that has been going on for years. The text also comes to talk about machismo and how that comes to actually take into part of the problem as well. And we will get into machismo later. This must actually come to an end by bringing more light to the issue and have people around the world know about the issue and help in the protest and putting pressure on the Mexican government. By doing this, we can actually help end this problem in Mexico and bring more safety to the women in Mexico. So now, we're going to actually look at two cases that actually happened in February of this year. We're going to look at the case of Ingrid Escamilla, who was 25 years old, and Fatima La Niña, who was only 7 years old. So in February of 2020, the murders of Ingrid Escamilla who was 25, and Fatima, the girl who was 7 years old, sparked outrage in the entire nation, or the entire country. Ingrid was killed by her boyfriend, and the photos of her that circulated of how she came to die, they circulated all around the country. Unfortunately, the man that killed her was being justified by the media and putting no blame on him, and putting the blame on Ingrid Escamilla. And for young Fatima, she was actually kidnapped from her school, and she was tortured and raped, and a few days later her body was found in a plastic bag. Both were very young, and the event made national news and gave light to the problem that had been happening for many, many years. So, of course, the protests happened throughout the nation, and eventually the president actually came to be asked about the situation in a press conference that he was doing. What actually he came to say sparked even more outrage, as his response was, "Look, I don't want the topic to only be about femicides. The issue has been manipulated by the media." In other words, here what Andrés Manuel López Obrador, who is the president of Mexico, is saying is that there is no problem, that all of this is just a manipulation of the media, that there is no such thing as a problem that is happening in Mexico. And we will actually get to this problem later as we actually talk about the interviews that I came to make. So, as I mentioned right now, I actually decided to interview people from Mexico, women in Mexico. So I have decided to interview people from different parts of the country to get different perspectives on the situation. All of them range from different ages, some very young, some older. However, we can get a certain idea of how they feel. They're not rich, they're just regular citizens like you and I. So we can understand how they feel as we would feel. So I decided to interview 3 people from Jalisco, one from the state of Guanajuato, one from the state of Nuevo León, and lastly, one from the state of Mexico, where the murder of Ingrid Escamilla actually took place. I chose the interviews from different parts of the country to see every perspective possible. One thing that I want you guys to keep in mind is that these interviews were conducted in Spanish. So I did my best to translate their answers to English. So it may sound a little bit weird. However, I will do my best to explain everything. So without further ado, let us begin with the interview questions. So the first question I decided to ask was, do you feel that you have any risk for your life just because of your sex or gender? And you will see on the top I also left it in Spanish in case you want to read it. So to this question, all of the women came to say yes. They actually answered yes to this question. They feel that every day they are at risk of being murdered or losing their life because of their gender, which in this case is of course female. However, the woman from Guanajuato came to say that she not only feels like she could die just because of her gender, but she also came to say, I feel at risk from other aspects apart from my gender. This comes to show that the great fear that women have in Mexico and come to face it in their everyday life, where the loss of life is evident for everyone. However, it is even more evident for women as they come to just live their life in fear every single day just because they go out on the street and are just a woman. Something that, of course, nobody could control. So the second question was, what is your opinion on the actions of López Obrador with this problem? So here the general response to this question was very negative against López Obrador, as many women were extremely upset with him. One of the strongest answers I got was from a woman from Guadalajara, Jalisco, named Paola Gutierrez. She said, all of the actions of Obrador are really stupid to me. I believe he doesn't take anything serious, and he also doesn't want to take care of his country or his people. He only thinks about the positive things and not the reality. This shows the frustration that women have against the president, as he hasn't done anything in respect to the situation, which is what the rest of the women responded, saying that he has done nothing at all and that they're unhappy about that. When the man who has the most power is not doing anything for the country, that's a big problem and something that actually needs to be brought out to the public so that people can know what this president is doing, which is nothing at all, which is not helping the situation, but it's actually making it worse. So the third question is, what is the cause of femicides? So to this question, most women answered that it had to do with Mexican society itself and what Mexican children are taught when they are kids, not only from parents but from the education system as well. One of the women interviewed, named Valeria Carvajal, also from Guadalajara, Jalisco, commented, there exists a machista culture of hate against women. Even between the same women, they have made us think that we cannot be friends. The answer let us know the internalized oppression that Mexican children, including myself, have come to receive since we are young. Since we are young, we are taught that women are lower than men, and that men are stronger than women, and that women must only make kids and be in the house while the men work and do all the manly things. This is something that even I grew up with. even something that I was actually internalized with from my parents. Because it is the parents that ultimately tell us this, as well as even in the education system, they come to show us this, making the masculinity seem even more important than the femininity, making men seem more important than women, which in this case, in this day and age, is completely not okay. However, unfortunately, this is still going on in Mexico, and this is still being taught to children. So things have gotten better a little bit, but not by much, as evident from this year alone. So the fourth question was, what can be done to stop this problem? To this question, there came a wide variety of answers, of course, and I will do my best to include all of the answers that I was given. There came a suggestion to make more privacy in apps like Uber and Didi, giving more information about the employees so women can feel safe in public and with those people. Another woman said to fix this problem it has to begin with the education system and how Mexican society comes to educate their children. Another woman said that the only solution that may be cruel, but it would be torturing and killing the murderers, which is a bit extreme. However, the most realistic answer that came was from a woman from Nuevo León who chose to remain anonymous, who said, I think it will take many years. It will not be a day-to-day thing, since I believe it's a cultural problem. Only in school can this be solved. Even though there is a hope, it is slight, and it will take a long time for the problem to end, since it is so ingrained in Mexican culture, even outside of Mexico. The unfortunate thing is that no one knows how long this will take. Nobody knows how long it will take for women to actually have the same equal rights as men, same equality as men in Mexico. So, with that, the interview is over, and now comes my conclusion. The problem is eminent and getting more attention as years go by, and the process of eliminating feminicides will be a long process, but if enough pressure is put on the government of Mexico, and the education system for the youth is changed, and the way of parenting as well is changed, Mexico can progress to lower the rates of murdered women in the country. It is just a matter of time and willingness, and no matter how much pressure is put on the government, let us have our voices heard even outside of Mexico, so that people may know what is going on, and so that women in Mexico may also have our support. This is really important for, of course, even Mexican Americans as well, as they want to see the country of Mexico prosper as well. They want to see Mexico, develop into a great nation that it could become. But first things first, we must actually put pressure on the government, and put the pressure on the government to start making new laws, to start making more privacy laws for the women in Mexico and for individuals in general in the country. And with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you.